So I'm Michael Strong, founder of Expanse, a virtual program based on dialogue and cultivating the genius of your child for ages 8 and up. And I'm here on When School Is Not Working with my colleagues. So I'll hand it off to Andrew Sachs and he can pass it around.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Andrew Sachs, CEO of Double Explorers. There's an online international learning community where kids collaborate with other kids from around the globe while they acquire the hard skills and the soft skills they need to succeed and work in life. And I'll pass off to Catherine Fraise.
Okay, so I'm Catherine Fraise, founder of Workspace Education and 100 Roads, and we are co-creating education right now in Bethel, Connecticut, helping parents organize alternative learning environments where we can all co-create the education we want for our children. And 100 Roads is really training anyone who wants to start a co-learning community or alternative education space. We help you work out what you want to do and get you going on your vision. And I'm passing you off to Matthew Barnes. Matt.
Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Matt Barnes, co-founder of The Education Game, which is a platform, blogging, podcast platform, training platform that works with parents. That's all we focus on how do we help parents learn how to support their children to, in some cases, move out of the educational system to give their children a much better learning experience. That's what we do, theeducationgame.com.
Terrific, Matt. Thank you. And that's a perfect segue into David. David, I always like to joke, we have various guests on this show, but some of our guests are people who somehow did not have a traditional education and somehow succeeded anyway. Because I think there are a lot of parents who believe that if their kid doesn't go to regular school and a regular college, then their life options will be limited. And so I'll let you give us the correct version, David, but I think of you as somebody who had an alternative homeschooling environment and eventually became one of the earliest VCs in the blockchain world. So someone at the forefront of innovation without a traditional education. And so maybe, David, you can tell everybody why their children must have a conventional education or their lives will be ruined. I'll let you correct that ludicrous statement. Go, David, tell us your story.
Thanks, Michael. No, that's a great summary. You know, for me, I was homeschooled, my first, 6 or 7 years, and, really sort of felt I got a big advantage from that, being able to pursue my own interests as opposed to a traditional curriculum. My parents sort of let me follow my passions and interests in technology and science at an early age. And I got the last 6 years in public school, but honestly, it was kind of boring, right? I mean, the other kids, were pretty far behind. They'd been socialized by other children, and so they couldn't interact with you or look in the eye or, articulate themselves. They were sort of very stunted socially. And I often think that's one of the big things that's overlooked as a benefit of homeschooling is better socialization by adults. I like to think of it as vertical socialization instead of horizontal socialization. I don't really believe other kids have a lot of sort of deep insights to teach each other, right? It's sort of juvenile behavior. And so I think if you really want to get ahead, you learn from somebody that knows more than you do, right? And so that really served me well as a young entrepreneur. Spent the first 10 years of my career building tech companies, and I was comfortable doing that at 15 and 16 and 17 because I saw people in their 40s and 50s as my peers, right? I had grown up speaking to my father's friends and, some who worked at NASA and others worked in government agencies and others were entrepreneurs and business people. And so that's kind of the world I felt comfortable in. And so it really sort of gave me a leg up and really sort of quickly advanced my career. And like you said, I was fortunate also to learn about Bitcoin at a very early stage, but it's because I was engaged with folks in the tech community that really wanted to promote these ideas of, free markets and, we're really involved in economics and a lot of these other areas of study that I was exposed to it in 2012 and sort of just spent the last 10 years now building companies, funding companies, like you said, on the venture capital and angel investment side. And, it's been a great journey, but yeah, for all of my experience, I think people really underestimate the capability of children at an early age. And I think if they're challenged and able to pursue their interests as opposed to being, kind of forced into rote learning, there's a lot more capacity that they can gain.
That's terrific. Before letting the other sharks at you, one clarification. Did you attend university at all? And how did that decision either way impact your career?
Well, I made a deal with my parents, and they, wanted me to go to college and do the traditional thing. And I knew I, from a very young age, was going to be an entrepreneur. And so I cut a deal with them, and I said, hey, when I build my first multi-million-dollar company, I'm going to drop out of college. And, they didn't think that was going to happen, so they were fine with that. And I knew it was going to happen. It took me till 19. So I had spent one semester in college, and then I was able to drop out when I finally raised $5.9 million for a biodiesel facility I was building in Maryland at the time. This is the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And so that finally gave me my opportunity to drop out of college. I mean, I had done some internet companies and some other interesting stuff before that, but that was sort of my first breakthrough into professional entrepreneurship and investing.
A Teal fellow before Teal fellows. Love it. Looks like Matt was raring to go.
Oh, no, that's very, very cool. The question that I would put to you is, because a lot of parents who might hear your story might come to the conclusion that you're just a savant. You're just so smart, so brilliant that this would have happened regardless. So give me a sense of what you were doing, like specifically, when you were 15 years old. Like you woke up. Give me a real simple description of your day to understand how you were spending your time and what was motivating you.
Well, at 15, it was sort of the early days of the internet, and I was really excited about, the developments going on there. And so I would spend a lot of time on my computer researching things online. But, I don't think it was at all a sort of unusual experience. Most of the kids, that were in my homeschool group, my mother started a homeschool group when I was pretty young. And by the time I got out of homeschooling, there was 40 or 50 families at our and other churches that all sort of joined this group. And that really allowed us, all the advantages that we would have had, to access all these, specialized, sort of areas of study. And really, it was that freedom to sort of choose my own interests. But my friends, honestly, a lot of them were getting into college when they were 15 or 16. Once you have the freedom to, not have to check off the boxes, you can move pretty quickly in your studies. And so, I wouldn't say I was the exception. I was surrounded by other bright kids that were, their interests might have been airplanes, and some of them went off and, got into special forces and flew helicopters. And some of them, had passions, that led them in other directions. But I wouldn't say I was the exception. I've seen a number of studies, and typically there's a 5 to 10 point IQ boost from homeschooling. Again, primarily, I think, due to more time with adults.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Good for you, dude. Good for you.
So I'm interested to know, when you go to high school, usually there's lots of homework, and yet you're starting companies. Were you doing all the homework and doing well in school, or were you not focused on school and doing your companies instead? Or school was just so easy, it was super quick and you could build companies in your spare time? What was the balance of entrepreneurship versus schoolwork while you were going to public schools?
Well, that's the kind of funny thing is I knew I was an entrepreneur from a young age. And so I was really focused on that. And I would effectively do the minimum possible work in order to graduate. So I promised my parents I would graduate. I would have liked to have dropped out of high school, but they really wanted me to finish. And so I optimized down to the single letter grade, how many classes I could fail, how many letter grades I needed in order to pass each class. You needed 21 out of 28 credits. And I graduated exactly 21 out of 28 credits. And I would cut deals with my teachers, right? So for example, in my senior year, I was building an online publishing company. So I cut a deal with my English teacher to publish her husband's autobiography, and she would give me a passing grade for the year. And I figured that was fair. I was building a publishing company, and that was worth at least a D- in English. So it was that kind of thing. Or I realized you didn't have to be 18 to incorporate a company in Delaware. So I had my own publishing company, and so I did a work release class, and I literally released to myself and give myself a grade at the end of the quarter and, put in the email report, right? So I would walk out of school at 10 a.m. and go report into my self-reported job, which I just thought was funny and hilarious. So I basically optimized as much time out of school as humanly possible. And there's lots of other great hacks. I was an insomniac when I was in high school, sort of pent up interests and things I couldn't do. And so, I would sleep in, and I think I probably missed 36 days my junior year, but I always got my mother to give me an excused absence. And so those don't count against you. And so literally I missed like every Friday of the year. So every moment I could get building companies and not in school was a win.
Wow.
Sounds like he should be running the education game.
Oh, no
Matt.
kidding. No kidding.
And I thought this was fairly unique until I recently read Edward Snowden's book, and he did the same thing in high school. And I was like, oh, okay. Other bright people have thought about this. But, I thought that was kind of funny, not the only one to occur to it.
So, I'm interested to know when you realized that it was a game, like when you realized, okay, this is just something I'm just going to like game through. Like, did you have like a moment, or there was a point in your life that you can remember when you're like, okay, this is ridiculous, I'm just going to game out of this thing?
Well, it started earlier because, at the age of 6 or 7, something like that, I realized I wanted to colonize space, and that was going to be really expensive. And the only way I was going to get there is if I built tech companies and I made a lot of money. And I was kind of betting long term that private commercial space development would gear up, and it finally has. I'm glad to say it's only taken last 25, 30 years, but now we're finally there. And so that sort of set me on the path of entrepreneurship. And so once I'd already set that goal, school was largely sort of just an obstacle to get to that goal, right? Because, none of my teachers knew anything about the internet. The first business class available to me was my senior year. And I think it's the only class I got 110% in. And I was trying to teach the teacher about technology and stuff like that. And so there wasn't anything in the school that offered any sort of substance or interest to me. And so it was the internet really where I learned everything. And with entrepreneurship, it's not like I was going into a profession that I needed to be certified, right? You can self-anoint yourself as CEO, right? And take a crack at building something new.
Love it. So fabulous.
That is
to what extent do you credit your parents for kind of the entrepreneurial bug and entrepreneurial culture? Or, I often think that cultural capital is another path through which people learn. And are you kind of sui generis, or do you think your parents and family had something to do with it?
Oh yeah, I would definitely credit, especially my mother and her side of the family. There was a lot of entrepreneurs that I looked up to at a young age. My uncle ran a landscaping company, and I really, kind of looked up to him, working for himself, and he's obviously very affluent, and so I said, hey, that's what you want to do. You want to, hire others as opposed to work for others. And so that kind of locked in as a concept really young at, 5 or 6 during one of the family reunions. And then, my father was very into history and science and things of that side. So I got a lot of the very, I guess, outgoing, characteristics from my mother, and some of the more, scientific and technology oriented stuff from my dad. But my dad is definitely very conservative. And so, for him coming up out of poverty, growing up, for him, college was, the escape from, the way that he grew up, right? So he's the first person in his family to ever go to college, graduate, and, become a working professional. And so, I think that's where some of the hesitation was. And, it took until that first breakthrough company to win them over. But, they were a little less worried after that.
So were you working, so on these companies, were you working alone, or were you a part of a team?
I would always try to build a team. At that age, you kind of reach out to your peers, but, over time I was, able to recruit, people more in their 40s and 50s and professionals to help build things out. And ultimately you end up hiring a lot of vendors, right? For the biodiesel company, I had to hire engineers to design the facility and, cut contracts with fuel suppliers and feedstock suppliers, and technology providers and, go meet with the regulators and go through the permitting process. So all of that was a learning process, and I'd build small teams and, we'd do a project and the project would, get bought, or we'd move on to another project, and you go through a lot of success and failure, kind of learning through the process. But, I try to remind people that entrepreneurship's a career, right? It's not a thing you do in a year off of college, right? It really takes a lot of practice to kind of learn all the skill sets involved in building the companies, building the teams, navigating the regulatory landscape depending on the industry. And so, that taught me a lot on the way, but it was, usually driven by research. For instance, I delved really deep into energy research in 2004, 2005, realized, the cost of oil was going to rise due to really fundamental factors in geology and world oil supply. And that sort of set me off on the, oh, wow, renewables are finally going to be economically competitive with the company, right? And catching that wave in the mid-2000s. So each company was led by research. And
we can barely hear you, David.
Well, I may be driving through rural Texas, so apologies if I'm.
Yeah, you were talking about research and realizing renewables would be become more valuable.
Sure. So each sort of company moved around sort of that nugget of into a topic for thousands of hours until I understood it, and then thesis. I could be.
Yeah, we're missing most of what you're saying. Are you probably on one of those hills? Go ahead, Matt. What were you going to say?
Well, no, I was just going to pick up as he was fading it out there a little bit that, I'm thinking about the amount of learning that he was doing in his teen years. That's just absolute. That's true, authentic learning. The question I'll put to him, and when he comes back online, is this question of like, how does one unlearn? And again, maybe he hasn't had exposure to this, but we have a lot of kids who are in the educational system, have been there for 10 years, and they're indoctrinated, right? The idea of risk. He just talked about, risk.
All those risks.
Yes, yeah. Right. And to remove a young person from that environment, I'd be interested to hear kind of how he might suggest that happens. So hopefully he can get connected to us, or reconnected, and we can talk through some of that.
Yeah, well, going back to his earlier, first, I emphatically agree with him. As somebody who creates mostly secondary schools, I've seen a lot of homeschoolers come into there, and I would say homeschoolers are almost always more mature. That kind of vertical rather than horizontal. I mean, it's so funny because the gossip about, or the allegation against homeschoolers is they won't be socialized. I would say 98% of them are way better socialized than our kids in school.
Yeah.
And then going back to your point, Matt, it sounds like he already didn't believe in school. I was talking about, there's kind of the church of school. Who believes in school and who doesn't believe? Who prays at the church of school? He didn't believe in school. He was already not a believer in school.
Well, I think very, very clearly he saw school as an obstacle.
Yeah.
And I think that, we are so scared that our children aren't going to be okay if they don't stay on that main highway, right?
Yeah.
And, I feel that all my success in life is because I've taken risks for what I believe in, for what I want to be doing.
Bingo.
And what gave me the confidence to do that, right? And I think the confidence came from little decisions and being successful in little decisions, right? But if you're the parent and you're blocking your child from actually making these decisions, then, you're prolonging how long they're going to be stuck in the system.
Yeah.
But it just is so beautiful to hear someone's journey when they haven't had those obstacles. And, I can see his potential was just unleashed by that choice.
Well, and Kath, picking up on that, he wasn't trying to get straight A's. So I think I've shared with you guys that my son is going to be the valedictorian of his high school. Just learned last week, and I got to tell you, I'm a little sad because the sacrifices that were required to do that meant he couldn't pursue the things. And I've had conversations with him about it. He couldn't pursue the things that he wanted because he was so focused on becoming the quote unquote, the number one student. So David said, I don't want to play that game, right? I don't want to compete on things that don't matter. I'm going to do things that do matter. And that is something that even in my own household, it is a hard thing to retrain. So,
and he never looked back.
Yeah,
right?
never look back. Yep.
One of the things that struck me is, both I think it's extraordinary that at 6 or 7, David wanted to get into space travel and realized it was very expensive and therefore he needed to make a lot of money. And then that's what he went out to do.
Yeah.
I think that's really extraordinary, but it reminds me of Laura Deming, who at the age of 9 or so, realized that people die and didn't want her dad to die, and so went into anti-aging. And that's what she's doing.
So there's another question here. I'll put this to the group. There are so many choices that we have and young people have available to them. I think at some point it's hard to actually reduce the choices to the ones that they want to invest in, right? So again, another question that I would want to know from David or y'all from your experiences. What helps a young learner ignore the clutter and decide, I'm going to do something in aging, right? I'm going to do something in renewable energy, because again, I've seen so many times that young learners are maybe it's fear again, are afraid of making a choice because what if it's the wrong choice? What do you think?
So I think part of it is it's really important to give them time to kind of churn through things. I've seen kids who don't know what they want to do, because we give them a lot more freedom than most programs, and they may churn a little while, but after deciding, oh, maybe it's this, no, maybe it's this, no, maybe it's this, no, that gives you some experience. And I think the opportunity that unschoolers have is they tried lots of things and, finally they get to something. Whereas I think if you're in schooling all the time, you really don't get to even, explore your interests is a trivial cliche. But I think it's really true. It really takes time to explore and experience. I thought I was interested in being a vet. Turns out I'm not, or whatever it is.
Yep.
I don't know if David is still around. Can you hear us, David?
I don't think he's there.
I'm here. I've
He's
switched phones. Let's see if this works any better.
Okay. Yeah, we were talking about how striking it was that, at the age of 6, you realized what you wanted to do. And, you're basically on that path. That's truly extraordinary. And we're wondering, what is it, why is it that some young people get that and others don't? Any idea?
Let's see.
Are you still with us, David?
He's connecting audio now. Yep.
We might want to just advise them to dial in with a phone number. Because the phone connection will be probably more reliable than the internet one.
Right. Good point.
No. So there are places in rural Texas where, especially driving West Texas, the phone is uncertain.
Well, I was just going to say that. So at Workspace, I see the path of young humans not to be a straight line at all. It's very much a zigzag going this way and then turning this way, and it can go like 180. Like it's not like, well, they're kind of going in this direction, they just turn 10% here. No. Like I see, complete zigzags, all the way through their development if they're left onto their natural devices. And I firmly believe that children need experiences and the chance to really explore, because it's usually some experience or some person, right, that will change a direction. Like the idea is that you want your children to be on a direction going somewhere, because as they're on a direction, that's where they're picking up the skills and the tools. And those skills and tools are going to prepare them for their next zig or zag or whatever they're going to be doing. But how they're going to zig or zag, right? They need to be out in the world meeting people and having experiences, right? And having these like spontaneous connections through maybe going to a fair and seeing, artisans working, or, anything could change a trajectory. So
Yeah.
are they staying within the four walls, or they're out there experiencing life?
Yeah.
But, popped off again. So what I'm getting then is that, in fact, in order to have a true direction, one which one maintains with integrity, one needs to, and not that there's lack of integrity, but I mean, meant by that is kind of stay true to the focus. You need actually to bounce around for a while. That it's this practice of bouncing around and maybe rejecting lots of things, trying things on and rejecting them before you get the one that is a good fit.
Maybe
then,
like dating.
Well, exactly,
Sorry.
exactly. Exactly. But, we see a lot of people graduate from college and they have no idea, and they spend a couple of years just, figuring it out.
All right. So adding to this, then it's he had shepherds. Like again, in the education game, we call it assistant coaches. These are adults who can come alongside him, and if he has an interest in entrepreneurship, can say, "Hey, here's some things you want to think about," or "Here's an idea. Why don't you come along and watch me do this?" So again, one of the other questions, and I'm start making a list because when he comes back on, I'm going to pepper him. Right?
Okay.
And so one of the questions is, how did he get access to these assistant coaches who turned out to be shepherds, mentors? Again, I've seen a lot of kids spin wheels and just kind of churn, spending a lot of time on the internet, just kind of churning, but with a little bit of a support, a coach of sorts, a learning coach, that churn can be a little bit more productive.
Well, and partially that overlaps with what I think of as cultural capital. And so I was asking about the entrepreneurship. Sounds like his mom's family has that kind of cultural capital. I also wonder about his church group. So it sounds like this largish, church community of unschoolers or homeschoolers. And it's funny, I guess I had expected that because it was church associated, they'd be homeschoolers, but it sounds like he was pretty much unschooled. So that's another question I'd be interested in. I mean, I guess my stereotype is religious homeschoolers tend to be more homeschooly.
Look, having tried to, homeschool someone who wanted to be unschooled, it's really not very easy. Like when you already have a self-directed learner and they really know what they want, every time you're trying to homeschool them, right, it seems to drain all their energy out. When they're unschooled and they're working their passion, they could work for hours and just, and they're learning so much more than you could ever give them. So, I really feel like it really depends on the child, the personality, their internal drive. It's really how can we create the right environment in the home that that fuels them rather than puts obstacles in their way.
Yeah, the language that you and others have talked about is feeding curiosity, feeding interest, feeding a passion rather than discouraging and redirecting. And from someone who, I'm a recovering tiger mom, right? I'm a Black Asian mom. And so as a recovering tiger mom, I realized how many times I was trying to shape and to redirect rather than simply feed an interest. So
I think that needs to be the subtitle of your book, Matt. Comments from a recovering Black Asian tiger mom.
That's right. With
Matt
a
Barnes.
beard and mustache. Yeah.
I would buy that book for sure.
I think I was thinking about
Andrew.
I still am.
I
started a motorcycle repair business when I was 13. I was writing software for a company when I was 16. I had computer repair business in college. I almost didn't graduate college because of it. And then I worked for a company for 18 years. Right. And I think I think I came up in a different era than he did. I think school has gotten progressively further and further from what society needs. Right.
Right.
I think when I think back on what I went through, I realized I had all this freedom. And I think today the kids don't. Right. It's like we talk about give them room to pursue their interests. Well, I didn't have to work hard in school. Right. I got into phenomenal schools. I got into RPI and MIT and Clarkson and Stevens, and I went to one of them and I wasn't stressed. And so I had the freedom. But today, I think we've competed and stressed our kids away from that. So if they go through the existing system, it's like we're putting them through a mental vice that doesn't give them the energy to go out and pursue these other things.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would still mention this question about technology. Like when I was coming up, and Andrew, you're probably 20 or 30 years older than me.
Yeah.
You did a family show, right?
That's right. So anyway, when I was coming,
baby Matt,
Baby Matt.
recently
Sorry,
out of
Baby
the
Tiger
womb.
Mom, Matt.
Tiger
right.
Mom,
Baby
Matt.
Tiger.
Baby Tiger Mom.
His
So-
title's getting longer and longer.
Yep. Well, when I was coming up, and I think we maybe had this conversation before, but video games were, an enjoyable activity, right? But you couldn't play a video game for 24 hours straight as you can.
It wasn't
today.
quite as engrossing as it is today.
Right. Right.
Only so much Pac-Man.
The bar for your attention is a lot higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so
I think, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the distraction level now is so much more intense.
I think the distraction level is so much more intense. I think the youth awareness that what you're jamming down their throat doesn't actually result in meaningful things in life. I think that's way higher.
Yeah.
Right. A teacher told you something in 1985. You're like, oh, that must be the truth. Right. Because they were the purveyors
That's
of knowledge.
on the test.
That's well, I think there was no internet, right? There was no right, and so they were the purveyors of knowledge. They served a wonderful function, which is to give you knowledge. Which today, congratulations, you got knowledge, so do I, right? Give me 6 seconds, I'll know a lot more. And so I think that disconnect, I think that opened up a whole window to our youth to have that passion and to be aware that, hey, I don't need to go to this place to get knowledge.
Well, and
No.
David mentioned that, he was 1995, the internet, and compared to school. So he was early recognized the internet is way more interesting than school.
Yeah.
Oh, I had that problem. I had that problem in 1986. And so the internet was really bad in 1986, and I still thought it was way more interesting than school. But I think today for the kids, it's like one is obviously you put them through the system, and every parent wants their kids to succeed. And so many parents believe that formula is get your kids into school, get them to a good school, get them through it, and therefore success will happen in life, right? And I think the challenge is, how do you help them break the glass?
Yeah.
How do you help those parents and those kids see that, even if they're successful at this system, right, which I talked about my kids were, right, how to get them aware that, you might be successful at this system, but there's something else out there that you can be it can be far more enjoyable and lead to happiness and success in every other dimension.
So the question, though, Andrew, is every parent has a definition of success that's operating either actively or passively in their head. And, as we talk about most of the things we talk about, if the parent's definition of success violates, in David's example, violates his own interests and his own curiosity, then there's a conflict there. And how, as parents who want our children to be happy and successful, we've been sold this idea that comes from one approach, one pathway, right? And so people like David, Kath's experience, my kids, even your experiences, Andrew. I mean, Michael's, all of us, right? All of our experiences tell us that pathway is bogus. So, but it's very durable.
And I think you don't get to that realization until you're out of the marketing funnel.
Yeah.
Right. So long as you're under the marketing funnel of higher ed in the United States, it's like, it's like sprinkling money down upon everybody, right? Going like, hey, this is the pathway to success, right? Well, in the end, they're getting your money to convince you that you need to give them your money.
That's right.
They're just returning it back to you through all these other programs and stuff. And someone's like, oh, I won this hackathon at my university. What'd they give you? $5,000. Oh, they gave you $5,000 off of a $70,000 a year tuition.
Right.
I got it.
Right.
And you're like, man, they made my life. Like, yeah, they only charge you $65,000 a year. I think the challenge is, how do you help parents get out of that? how do you help them get enough awareness to break that, to get out of that marketing funnel that is this education game?
Well, and that's where I think, you know, the content we're producing here and, you know, the platforms we're talking about developing, just rich, you know, diverse experience of people who have had fabulous lives without going through the usual system. And Kath, I have a small request. Often you speak in terms of we, the royal we believe this about education, we believe that about education. I was going to scream, no, we don't. No, we don't. So you could say some people still believe this stuff about education, but I think we need to put it in the past tense and create a we that no longer takes it seriously.
Let me ask you guys this question. We talk about a lot about K-12 here, right? Because we've got solutions around K-12. Is the beast that we're really up against, is the thing that's really keeping parents from seeing this, is it the higher ed beast?
It is the higher ed beast. It's absolutely the higher ed beast.
So it's like that's the thing that's sprinkling down all the.
How else are people going to be like fooled into paying that much for higher education? Do you realize this is the only country where it happens in the world, pretty much?
This is a threat, you know, we're 3 times as expensive as the next country.
Right. I grew up in Australia where education, you know, higher education is absolutely free. Right. We don't have this kind of marketing. Right. The decisions that we make as a learner is really based on our interest.
So, Andrew, you just gave me a really interesting idea. So we talk about the importance of media literacy for kids, right? To understand how to outsmart the marketing angles that are coming at you. We talk about financial literacy for the same reason. What about college literacy? Because
education literacy.
Or I mean, but even just more specifically about college. Right? The whole structure of college is based on these basic tenets of people paying for a service that doesn't have a clear outcome. Right. In fact, that not only not clear, oftentimes it's a fantasy.
It's a fantasy. It's a little bit like, you know, like, I don't want to say Al Qaeda, but like you sell like like they're going to go and have the best afterlife possible, right? If they just do this thing, right?
That's right.
Right. But it's similar, like, you know, like brainwashing, right? But they're selling the dream, right? And we fall for it. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
No, Kath, to use the royal we again. We fall for it.
I fall for it. My daughter's just graduating Tufts.
Who's watched Breaking Bad?
Sorry, I've watched Breaking Bad. Okay. Yes.
Awesome show. If anyone's not watched it yet, great television. One of the things I think I see in Breaking Bad, it's like they brings out like every single thing that that Walter White does wrong. The main protagonist. Is really, I look at as like something that's fundamentally wrong with our society. So he's doing things because he's got to cover insurance bills, you know, that he can't pay for, or he's got to get money to cover his son to go to a good college, right? It's like you look at all of his wrong missteps, and they're all anchored in what I think are just fundamentally broken things about America, broken things, and one of them is higher ed, right? And the fact that we talk about saving all of this money up so your kid can go to college, right?
Gosh,
right? And so you can hand over this money and you put it in a special account with these special people that take 1% of your money a year from you, by the way, FYI, right? That's you know, and then you send your kid off to university and you don't actually get anything on the other side of that thing. Right? There's no.
Oh yeah, you get a lot of letters, right? Like a lot of like, you know,
and
solicitations,
you get invitations to donate back to the university.
My grandfather always liked to say, you know, BS stands for bullshit, MS more the same, PhD piled higher and deeper. And he graduated from college in the Great Depression and couldn't get a job for years, and he was radically disillusioned with it. So I actually grew up in a family that was pretty much dismissive of higher education.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's entirely possible to go the other direction. And large subsets of America more or less regard higher education as a joke.
I just got done reading, or actually right in the middle of reading, a book called The Price You Pay for College, written by Ron Lieber. I don't know if any of y'all have heard or read about that.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, it really, I mean, this idea of college literacy. It describes in great detail how colleges pray. I mean, there's another way to describe it. And again, I was on a university board, and so I saw this in the institution about any number of things, from how the university would raise tuition, knowing that it will discount it to certain kids. And so they would only get a fraction of the increase that would come to the institution from the increased tuition. I mean, there's all these games that universities play in the application process. They spend reams of dollars on marketing of a university, and every university, that is the first thing that they spend money on because it's a competition. So there are all these things I'm learning in this book that would be a fantastic lesson for parents and students to realize that they're paying something extremely, paying for something that's really hard to prove the value of.
There's PayScale as an organization that looks at salaries for different professions and everything. And I've seen them do ROI on various majors. And really the only majors with a positive ROI are STEM majors. There's a case that, elite colleges give an ROI, law, business, med school have a positive ROI. But what parents don't realize is a communications major from Kansas State or a marketing major from Utah State is worthless. Basically, you're paying for 4 years of partying, and the kid you'd be better off putting your money in a money market and have the kid get a job and learn something.
Yeah.
And so, mostly our higher education system, for maybe 80% of the kids, maybe 70%, I think, is a 4-year party that is paid for by parents and taxes.
Ooh, again,
how can we help parents? Today, obviously, I think K-12, there's a lot of glass being broken on K-12 right now because of how poor the online education is, right? So there's a lot of parents gaining awareness. Do you think they're also doing that same thing in higher ed? Do you think the glass is getting broken in that regard as well?
On the consumer side, or in the institutions themselves?
No, by the consumers. Do you think the consumers are gaining a higher awareness that this, what's happening in undergraduate education in particular, is this, systematic fleecing, Andrew, of Americans?
I think that parents don't care as long as they get the piece of paper, to be honest. I don't think they care if it's super easy, if they learn anything. I don't think they care as long as they get in the piece of paper. And that's the saddest statement that I think I've made in a year.
Right. And but again, the tide is shifting, because every time a Google or an Apple or Walmart or pick your company, IBM, says we're no longer going to look at the college degree as the entrance point. We're going to actually look at the skills, and if you have a college degree, we'll consider it, but it's not a primary decision maker anymore. Every time that gets published, it does start to slowly chip away on these decades-long marketing strategies from universities.
So, and certainly in my circles, of course, I'm in unusual circles. Everybody talks about what a joke college is. On the other hand, from the student side, think of it as a student. I mean, I was sort of dismissive of the party thing, but you have a choice as an 18-year-old between going off and working versus your parents paying for you to go to a place where you can drink and be around attractive young people and date and party.
If I told you about the Nobel Nomad houses this summer in the Mediterranean, so starting in July, we're gonna have a house. Is it what we were just talking about? A bunch of young people around partying.
Yeah, that's not the angle that you're looking for, Andrew.
But I do think the social thing, I think one of the challenges we face in shifting the system, whether it's high school or college, is young people do need to be around people their age. And the system monopolizes those opportunities.
And I think I went through that with my own son, right? He actually took a gap year, right? And did some awesome things, did tour Europe, he's actually contemplated being a priest and did a little bit of mission work, decided that wasn't his pathway, right? And then he was going for his freshman year, right? Or really sophomore year, because he had enough credits. But it was obviously interrupted by COVID, right? But it was so clear that, you know, hey, we got to get them out. We got to get him socializing with these other people. And it was desperate. It was really what he wanted, right? So what can we do? What can we do to help parents with that, right? Can we create that environment for them where the kids can really learn and grow and still have that socialization and not be fleeced?
See, I aspire to get to the point where our movement is large enough we can take over all the empty shopping malls of America and have these co-learning, you know, CAS co-learning communities in every former shopping mall in the U.S.
Wow, you
Yeah,
dream
well,
big.
I'd have to say that, you know, I do feel like that age between like 14 and 22, that 8-year span, right? We are just in default in this country. We just we park them basically, because what else are we going to do with them, right? And it's up to us to come up with some really awesome options. And I think this is what I'm enjoying the most about COVID is there are so many more things out there, so many incredible growing gap year things that you can do and opportunities. You just really need to go out and look for them. So you have to get creative, right?
But
We have to
talking
all
about
get creative.
Blake Bowles, you know, Blake takes these, you know, young people on these trips together. And so I think another pathway is, you know, why be stuck in a prison-like ugly public high school building? I can imagine with basically the same money, you could have kids going on incredible trips. And if you had that flexibility, then they would have the experience of travel, nature, you know, internships. So it's a matter of, and in groups, I think they do want to be around young people, each other.
Yeah, well, even right now, like, I don't know if you know about Galileo XP, but, you know, they're organizing these like groups of kids, and they are actually challenging people all over the country, if they want to create an actual dojo, like a, you know, like a karate dojo, but like it'd be like a learning dojo where anyone who's following the Galileo XP curriculum, you can go online and find that, could all meet in a local area. And they can find other people doing that thing. Like I think you don't have to think about going to school even. You can think about, okay, maybe I can get a bunch of kids in our neighborhood or my kids' friends together. We could all like sign up for Galileo XP. It's not expensive. And then you could create, like, you know, at the start in your own home, a little dojo, and then go and be embedded in some kind of community space or the library, right? It's really not that difficult to start. It's just about, you know, expanding what you can imagine is possible.
You know, now just making me think of that, I'm thinking, how do we all identify each other who are out of the system? And playing around with, you could have an app, or you could also have some kind of almost like gang signia, where maybe you have a certain cap or an earring or something like, hey, we're one of the cool kids
Tattoo?
that go to school. Yeah. We're one of those cool weirdos. And then ultimately get the fashion flip where, oh no,
I don't know, we're people who are
school?
allowed to be ourselves, right? And we don't have to conform to a system. You know, we're going to be, you know, interesting. We like to talk to anyone who's interesting and wants to start a conversation about things, you know.
So,
sorry.
yeah, I'm sorry. No, please continue.
No, I'm just saying that, you know, that's the whole, I mean, I love homeschoolers because they can be themselves. Right. And that's the ultimate freedom, is for your child to actually grow up with the freedom of actually being themselves and not having to conform to the mob. You know, and I'm finding, like, right now, especially like on social media and all these sort of things, like the pressure to conform, you know, speech wise, dress wise, it's pretty intense, right? Like we need to give our children the freedom to be who they are.
Okay, I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. I don't know if you know an author named Viktor Frankl.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yep.
And I'm looking for the quote, but it's something like, when a person lacks purpose, they will seek entertainment. And so, you know, one of the themes that I'm hearing, this young man, I think I mentioned to you that I interviewed last week, he loves magic. He got so crazy excited about magic. He just went so deep. He found a purpose. Andrew, it sounds like you, when you started, doing the entrepreneur thing, you started finding your purpose. David, likewise. There's something there, that purpose insulates you from wasting a life. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about some of that aspect of what we're talking about.
I think I think we're humans, right? We're pack animals. We're here to help the group, right? That's our purpose. We are no more alive than our red blood cells are alive outside of our bodies, right? We talk about purpose. Purpose to me is it's like the proxy for helping the pack, right? It's doing good for other people, right? It's built into all of us. I think we live in a society that in a lot of ways beats it out of us, right? But I think if you get it in education, if you get it in life, it's just you're back to being human again, right? You're not decimated by this, society that divides you up and separates you and disconnects
Fragments
you,
everything,
right? And instead it brings you back to the human that we all belong as, right? And we label that something new. Well, we had that 20,000 years ago, right? We all had purpose, right? Right. And just we all have to have that in our life. We have to have something that we're doing good, that are helping achieve a common goal, that help other people.
You're onto something really, really important though, that you just gave me an aha moment, right? Because when you think about that, like what you said, Andrew, about we want to contribute to the whole, right? To the pack. And is our pack our year group in a school? Is that the pack that we aspire and want to be contributing to?
Oh God,
right?
no. You mean
right?
like in regular school today?
Yeah, like regular school today, right?
The ones we're in competition with?
Yeah,
right?
I'm saying like, what is the environment, right? What is the
ones
environment?
whose grades are totally separate from ours and we're pitted against each other? Yeah, there's no pack, right? There's pure division going on there. No togetherness.
The solution has to be in creating the right whole for these people to be operating in, these youth, to contributing their soul and their essence into.
I want to take a slightly different angle, but I think purpose and community together, and 20,000 years ago, they were deeply integrated. I think there is reason to divide them, but I think purpose and community together are the essence of social emotional well-being. And I would say that almost all addictive behavior and almost all or substantial portion of mental health issues are due to lack of purpose and community. Right now, behavioral health issues are the #1 cause of disability in the US. And mostly it's addictive behaviors and oppression and anxiety. And if we had a healthy purpose and community, we would see dramatic public health savings. And I mean purpose and community in adolescence.
Yeah, no question. No question.
I think you didn't throw school under the bus as hard as I thought you should have right then.
Well, I'm implying, are public schools causing an epidemic of mental illness? Yes, 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 yes. And yes, and yes.
And the one that I feel, just to demonstrate what Michael said, and the one that, when we first met, end of June or beginning of July, right? It was, we had this conversation and I was talking about what my son had gone through and the challenges, and you asked me a few questions, and it was about how did the school react to our challenges, right? Right. And it was, pathologizing him, right? Convincing me that I needed to do something to pathologize him, not, hey, my son's actually having a perfectly rational reaction to an insane system, to set it to an environment that as humans, we're not designed to be inside of, right? And we're all worried about there's something wrong with our kids, right? And then we drug them. Right? Oh my God. There's one thing I regret in life. It's getting conned by the school system into thinking that I needed to medicate my son. It took me 3 years and several therapists later that really understood what was going on to undo that damage. Right. And probably 6 years before I actually managed to undo that. Right. And all because I had a system that had convinced me as a parent that I needed to medicate my kid, that it wasn't the system that needed to change.
Just picture how quickly this whole system will dissolve when more people realize, as we do, that the system is causing a public health catastrophe. Not only public health catastrophe, but an individual, again, mama bear revolution.
Amen. I was just talking to a parent who's a school board member up in the upstate New York area, right? And and they're crying for I think they're at 28% of kids are on IEPs, and they're crying for more resources to put in more, to label more kids and have, and it's like, when does this end, right? Like, congratulations, you've created this monstrosity, and now you need more money and more time and more energy to perpetuate it, right? And she's like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm like, it doesn't to me either. But I didn't understand that. I think it's so hard to see that when you're inside the system and all those parents around you, and right, it's like that marketing machine, that flow of information from the school and all the other parents, that is glass that is so hard to break.
I think people don't see. I don't think people see an alternative, right? So that's what we're here for, right? To give people these alternatives. And they are out there, right? And it does require, people getting to know your child and to know your family. But, you need to reach out and advocate for your family, and the resources are there. You can just call Matt over here. He's awesome. But all of us will help you, of course. And we're all trying to, go out there and create these resources, because we know, because we've been there ourselves as parents. And that is the reason why we've been creating these things in the first place, because we know there's a huge need out there.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm going to be punctual, and it's 7:59. So thanks again for another episode of When School's Not Working.
Okay.
And sorry, David was only on for a little bit with us, but sounds like
great story though.
Yeah, it is a great story.
He's hopefully on a great vacation somewhere in the hills of Texas.
There you go. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again next week.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.